Welcome to another edition of Bethel Backstage. We're happy that you've joined us here as we're going to talk more about the recent preaching on Romans 13 and the role of government and how the Christians should relate to this institution that is a part of all of our lives. And joined with me here today is, of course, Pastor Steve DeWitt, who's leading us in our discussion here of these challenging matters. And also we have a special guest today, Dan Blankenberg. And Dan is a member here at Bethel Church, and we have brought him in just because of his very unique experience. Dan was the chief of staff for several congressmen on Capitol Hill in D.C. for 17 years, and he's presently a practicing attorney here locally. So Dan, just want to share a little bit about yourself, your family, and your involvement here at Bethel?
Yeah, I'm married to Candy, and we've attended Bethel for 4 years. We're members. We're in a small group. We both attend Bible studies here. We met at Calvary Church in Valparaiso and got married there 7 years ago.
Very good. Well, we're happy to have you here and look forward to hearing a little bit about your experience being in D.C. for all that time as we talk about government. I do want to just kind of quickly summarize, Steve, what you covered in the sermon where your outline was 3 whats and 2 whys, right? And your whats being we need to be subject to government, we need to do what is good or approved in the eyes of government, and we need to pay our taxes. And so we hear those things, and in some sense we agree with it, but in the other sense there's that part in our heart maybe that might struggle with it a little bit, or certainly doing these things is sometimes a struggle or difficulty for Christians of all levels of maturity. So why is that? Why is it when we think about being subject to government, paying our taxes, doing what's good in their eyes, why is that sometimes a struggle?
Well, it's just human nature. Ever since the fall, there's a DNA within us that is an anti-authority, and we push back against anybody that would tell us what to do. And this is on all levels, of course. And since in our society, government represents humanly the highest level of authority and power over us, and in many ways dictates expansively so many aspects of our life. Governance authority probably represents the highest level of our struggle to submit as unto the Lord, or as Peter says, for the Lord's sake. And so it's the same. The heart of the problem is always the problem of the heart, and there we are again. One more relationship that is deeply affected by sin. Although I might add this, I think there is also an ideological struggle often when government. Even the purest form of government, the best principal in the middle school will have people that will resent him because he's an authority figure. And even if government was perfect, we would struggle, but so often government is not. And so I think a lot of it also is that we're being led often by individuals and being told things often that we don't agree with, and yet we're called to submit. And the reason the Holy Spirit put it in the Bible is that we need this command. It's not going to naturally happen. And so therein lies our struggle. Yeah,
because the fundamental aspect of sin is rebellion, and we all just want to throw ourselves in our own lives and just live life with pure autonomy and no authority and worthy authority. And obviously we're under God's authority, and God's entrusted, as you preached, others to help provide authority to us.
I read a great quote. It says that everybody wants to live in a theocracy and everybody wants to be Theo.
Well
I thought that was good.
Yeah. Hey, maybe Dan, something for you. Our society, when it often speaks about government, it's so politicized and tensions are so high and emotions so high that oftentimes it just feels like people are, in some camps, consistently demonizing government and those who work in government, whether it be politicians or police or any sort of nature. And probably this is partly because of the thing that Pastor Steve just said. We resist authority. Sometimes we just naturally in our flesh resist those who are in authority. Your experience working in the very inner halls of government, what can you just help us understand about how that functions, the type of people there, the motives, the intentions that you've seen?
Yeah. You have to remember that the Congress is just a reflection of our culture and who we are as people anyways. And as Steve has alluded to, or frankly just said clearly, expressly, that sin pervades the human heart. So that doesn't change just because they got elected to Congress. And so you see every freshman class that comes in, whether it's a Senate class or a House class, it only takes a little bit of time to find out who's going to be the show horse, the workhorse, who's going to be the institutionalist, the philanderer, the alcoholic. You know, every kind of type of person you have generally in American society does show up in Congress, and it only takes a little bit of time before it is really revealed. There is, no doubt, a core group of Christians in Congress at any one particular period in time, both elected members of the House and Senate, or perhaps even the White House, and the staff that work for them.
Yeah, I have to believe that, you know, as you kind of said, it's just a reflection of American society. And I look at the people around me, and there's obviously not everybody's a Christian, but it seems like there's just a lot of people who are good, wholesome people doing their best, trying to be good, you know, parents and members of society and friends and all of that. And sometimes it just seems to me that we just tend to think of people in government as not even human. You know, they're wicked, or they're all what's the word I'm looking for? They're all conspiracy. There's the Illuminati all trying to control our lives and such like that. And has that been your experience?
Brad, what blogs are you reading exactly?
Sure.
I'm a little concerned.
It's Facebook. Yeah, no,
well, I remember probably the most annoying show that was on TV when I was on Capitol Hill was The West Wing, because everybody thought that's what Washington, D.C. was. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, not everybody is that good looking, and not everybody has that many quippy lines. You know, you do have normal people out there. That's the beauty of democracy. So when it doesn't live up to what our media makes it out to be, people get frustrated. They expect perfection. And the truth is, none of us are perfect. And certainly the process that legislatively has been set up in the Constitution requires an imperfect decision-making process, a compromise process. So, you know, those on the right and those on the left are not always going to get what they want. And the system is set up to never really have wide swings one way or the other as well. So that leads to a lot of people, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, getting frustrated when your guy or your gal is in power.
When we think about relating to government, then, and those in authority and such like that, you know, what do the professional government workers, you reflecting them, or Steve, as you understand it, you know, think what would most want to receive from the populace and from each of us as citizens? You know, we're supposed to, as you taught, do what is good, do what is approving in the eyes of those who are in leadership. So what is it, do you think, at the bedrock thing that those in political leadership really hope, want, expect from their citizens?
Well, it's no different than what you expect from the members of the church here, okay? You want people to make an effort. You don't want them to just complain. And having answered the phone for many years on Capitol Hill to complaints from constituents, you find that anybody can complain and describe a problem. Nobody can solve a problem. And that's the easy thing to do, is complain. So really you're looking for problem solvers, and they're very, very rare. There's just a lot of name calling and vitriol in the rhetoric on TV, and that makes its way into the phone calls into the congressional offices. If you really wanted to be effective with your member of Congress or your senator, you would have a constructive, well thought out communication with them, whether in a letter or a phone call, that was organized and calm, and it did not have name calling involved in it.
You know, I don't know if I can speak to that real life experience. But I think that if you look at what God's called us to do as Christians, it has to align somewhat in what every person in government would want. Who wouldn't want to have citizens that are submissive and subjective, or living subjectively under their leadership, and that are praying for them, and even if we disagree, supporting them and honoring them in their position. Back to Dan's earlier point, though, I'm sure in government you have all kinds of people that pretty much want worship me, and then you have servant leaders who are wanting to serve alongside and substantially move things forward. But I know that we're called to be the kinds of citizens that a noble public official would want to have in their constituency. And that's the kind of people that we're urging our Bethel Church to be. We want to be good citizens. We want to be contributors to what is good and approving what is good, and uplifting our authorities over us, whether it be law enforcement, elected officials, the judiciary, etc. And I think in doing that, you actually earn the right to speak to the things that you actually maybe would like to see different. But if all you get is complaint and, oh, here's those Christians and all they do is whine about things, we haven't earned the right to be heard. So I would urge us as a church to make sure we're doing the things that God's called us to do, and leveraging that then for good, whether it, again, be legislative or a relationship with a government official that maybe is in a place to make a difference.
And that certainly applies to how we conduct ourselves online. It's an election season, and the things that we are seeing and will continue to see, people posting on their own social media accounts, oftentimes it can be very polarizing, vitriolic even, unkind towards those in leadership in our government. And there is obviously, I think, a place to criticize, isn't there, and to express our opinion, but isn't it important for us to just keep the tone civil and to show even respect for our government, even as we advocate for views, or as you said, Dan, advocate for solutions?
You think about examples in the Bible of people who served under authority, exemplary. So you think about Joseph or Daniel or Mordecai, even Esther. And in each case, those that they were in authority, but they were under authority, and those that were in authority over them had a high level of respect for them, even their worship. And that's the kind of citizens that we want to be, and to follow their example.
All right, well, thinking through your sermon a little bit more, you have these three what we should do in relationship to government, and then you have the motives behind it, the why we pay our taxes, the why we're subject, the why we're trying to be good citizens that is respecting our government and pleasing them generally. And I know there's a big elephant in the room. We're going to get to it in the coming weeks as far as what if there's bad government, right? And how do we relate to them? And so hold on, we'll get to that in the future weeks. But for now, the why do we posture ourselves in relation to government this way? Steve, you said there were two key reasons that the authority the government has comes from God himself. He's instituted it, he's ordained it, but also because our conscience calls us to that, calls us to be respectful and submissive, and also, I think, active, we're saying here, active in supporting our government and advocating for a Christian worldview that government should embrace and pursue. But we're in an election year, and whatever the outcome of this coming election will be, some of us undoubtedly will be happy with it, some of us will all be dismayed by it, and as Christians, as we think about how we think theologically about government, how should we respond when elections either turn out the way that we like or don't turn out the way that we like, or government moves in a direction that we find is wise and approving, or one that we disagree with? How should we think about that theologically?
Well, I remember that election night was the most important night of the year for me, which is saying a lot. I mean, I'm taking, more than Christmas, more than Easter. At that time I was not walking with Christ, and certainly knew of him, grew up in a churched household, but really found it. I remember one time I got a call on election night from a fundraiser from my university, my undergraduate university, and I said, "Do you realize you're calling someone in Washington, D.C. on election night?" And I hung up. And, you know, what a terrible thing to say and do. But I think my priorities were just wrong at that point in my life. And I just really am thankful and grateful for Christ continuing to pursue me and find me.
You know, I would add to that, I think that one reason we feel tension on election nights is because it represents for many people, and sadly for many Christians, and even sadly in my own heart, I can remember certain elections where it was too important to me. And I think that I was viewing political power almost like it's, you know, was the ultimate power, and my hope being in the right person in office or what might come from that. And I'm for the highest caliber, best quality, highest integrity, and sure, a Christian worldview is a huge help. But as Christians, we shouldn't be too upset about this, because we see that no matter what throne is being filled by that election, there is always a higher throne. And the higher throne, on that throne, is Jesus. And all these little thrones, whether it be the mayor or the governor or even the president of the United States, he is fulfilling God's sovereign purposes. And we don't have to fear that somehow God's will has gone off the rails because the wrong person is in office or the election didn't go the way that I wanted. And so I think we need to, temper our we need a solid Christology to temper our dismay when elections go the way that not the way that we want them to go. And I think when there's an overreaction to a loss in an election, it really is unveiling the heart issues and where our hope is, and really the idolicizing, the enthroning of mankind and manpower and the kingdom of man. And we're members of the new creation. We are part of this new kingdom. We are, our hope is not in kings and queens and prime ministers and presidents or congressmen. And so I would urge us as a church to get ready for November and to not be too happy if the right one wins and in your mind, whoever that would be, and also not too sad if it doesn't go our direction.
Well said. Thank you, Pastor Steve, for that. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here at this latest edition of Bethel Backstage. Certainly, this is a very relevant subject for us to be talking about, the role of government and how, as Christians, particularly in an election year, we need to be thinking about God's hand and also our relationship to government, and also being careful not to place too much trust in government or to be too dismissive about our responsibility as citizens in relating to it. And so we hope you'll continue with us in this journey as we work through Romans 13 and deal with even some more difficult questions yet to come. And we'll see you at the next edition of Bethel Backstage.